A rough peak rises high in the northern Himalayas of Nepal. Towering over the nearby mountains, Manaslu is the 8th highest peak in the world and stands at an impressive height of 8,156 meters. From a distance, the mountain appears to be equally beautiful and terrifying due to its unusually steep slopes and extensive ridges covered in jagged cornices. British mountaineers first became aware of Manaslu in 1950, and many expedition teams noted a possible ascent route from the mountain's northeastern face. However, they never attempted to climb it at the time. Even though the British didn't attempt to summit the mountain then, several Japanese expeditions tried to reach the summit. Manaslu was conquered by Toshio Minashi of Japan and Gyaltsen Norbu of Nepal in 1956. Although the mountain was popular at the time, the next successful ascent of Manaslu happened in 1971. However, the locals did not view the mountaineers positively at the time. They had gradually grown extremely hostile to climbers during the excursions from 1950 to 1956. Especially after a bad avalanche in 1954 that wrecked a monastery and killed 18 people. The inhabitants had started to think that the climbers had offended the gods. Though it's not the most popular of the 8,000-meter peaks, Manaslu's unique climbing experience inevitably draws mountaineers to its sharp steep slopes in the hopes of reaching its treacherous pointed peak themselves. Despite its intimidating exterior, the most popular route for climbers to reach Manaslu's summit is rather straightforward and provides a unique climbing experience compared to the other 8,000-meter Himalayan peaks. Since Manaslu typically experiences considerable snowfall during the Himalayan monsoon season, most summit pushes are attempted in the early fall. The extra snow that builds up on the mountain eases climbers' ascent once it has had time to settle and harden. Navigating the mountain's steep, rocky ridge in the spring is much more challenging since it has yet to be completely covered in snow and ice. The difficulties compound when the mountain is hit by strong winds, forming the distinctive cornices that line the mountain summit. These cornices are so large that it's believed most climbers mistake a false top as the summit and never actually make it to Manaslu's true summit. Many people assume that climbing beyond the 4th summit would be borderline suicidal because the true summit is a sharp rocky outcropping that, when completely covered in deep snow in the autumn, appears to be a large unsupported cornice. However, the snow is deeper and more stable than it seems. Manaslu is regarded as one of the simpler 8,000-meter mountains to climb, aside from the final push to the summit, because of its comparatively easy gradient and the absence of demanding technical expertise. Despite this reputation, Manaslu has seen a great deal of fatalities compared to other 8,000-meter summits like Koyo. The ascent of the glacier is fraught with massive gaping crevasse fields, a particularly active ice fall between camps 1 and 2, and large ominous serac ringing its top ridges. However, the way up Manaslu is not particularly steep. Along with these risks, climbers who want to reach the summit of Manaslu must be vigilant about the snow conditions to avoid being swept away by a natural disaster. This is because the mountain receives a lot of snow each year and has typically warmer weather than other 8,000-meter peaks. Manaslu's climbing season was in full force in September 2012. As is normal for any 8,000-meter climb, the climbers' teams arrived at base camp and put up their ropes to climb to higher camps, acclimatizing as they went. Snow fell over several days in 2012, which was not a good start, before a favorable 10-day weather window appeared around September 15. Camp 3 was placed lower than normal during the climbing season that year since a sizable serac field would provide wind protection at the lower Camp 3. While the normal Camp 3 site was located approximately 100 meters higher up the mountain, it was also significantly more exposed to the strong winds that were constantly pelting the mountain. On September 22, 2012, a severe blizzard blanketed Manaslu, trapping the climbers hoping to reach the summit. Isolated in their tents, they spent the night trying to weather the storm and get some rest before sunrise. On September 23, around 4:30 a.m., while most climbers on the mountain were sleeping, a massive serac estimated to be about 600 meters wide broke off above Camp 3, triggering a terrifying avalanche that swiftly gained momentum while it crashed down the mountain. The 31 individuals at Camp 3 were carried away in the avalanche as it tore through the camp, uprooting the tents. Glenn Blake, a professional skier, aiming to reach the top of the mountain without oxygen and then ski back down, recounted reading in his tent while Gregory Costa slept next to him in his sleeping bag. Costa was launched from the tent and was never seen again. After the initial gust of wind from the avalanche blasted the tents and climbers at Camp 2, they figured the worst was over. They turned their attention up the mountain to evaluate the disaster's severity. Greg Hill, a Canadian professional skier, recalled seeing headlamps strewn along the mountain above him and initially assumed that the climbers were doing some early morning acclimatization. However, he soon noticed that Camp 3 was no longer visible and immediately realized that the avalanche had swept Camp 3 away. Hill and the other climbers at Camp 2 hurried up the mountain to help rescue the climbers from Camp 3. By daylight, helicopters had been summoned, and a thorough search for survivors of the 31 climbers swept away by the avalanche at Camp 3 had begun. By the end of September 23, 2012, 8 people had been identified as deceased, while 3 were still missing. The 3 missing people's destinies had all but been decided as the days went by in the wake of the catastrophe. Many of the surviving climbers gave up their push for the summit, while a few persisted and tried to reach the summit of Manaslu. One of the missing climbers was Remy Leclus, a Frenchman who served as Glenn Blake's team's guide. As a somber burial was held for him and several other French climbers back in Chamonix, France, Remy Leclus' wife heartbreakingly looked for him on the glacier. However, a short time later, his body was discovered in a crevasse after being carried there by the avalanche. In the end, the tragedy resulted in the deaths of 11 people. Luckily, several small independent teams had abandoned their climbs just days earlier due to concerns about a likely avalanche. Although some climbers were saved thanks to sound thinking, others continued on and put themselves in harm's way. Herd mentality played a large role in people dying during the accident. Even though the warning signs were present, the larger commercially led teams continued to push up the mountain, and the other large commercial groups felt pressured to get their clients to the top of the mountain, foolishly continued. With false confidence pulsating through the groups, many experienced climbers and leaders were making poor decisions. These poor decisions turned into dangerous ones as guides were not clipping in while crossing crevasse fields, resulting in their clients doing the same. This herd mentality had penetrated the psyche of even some of the most experienced climbers. While extremely unfortunate, the avalanche in 2012 served as a much-needed wake-up call to many of the large commercial expedition companies. The companies were overlooking potential safety concerns and ended up putting people in danger. Fortunately, the companies and climbers learned their lessons due to that unfortunate event.